Stephen, thank you very much for joining us today on the Hunter Esq podcast. Just as sort of an opener, can you introduce yourself to our guests today, Stephen? You know, who are you? What do you do? We've obviously known each other for 30 years, and some of the stories from back 30 years ago, we're definitely not going into whatsoever. But yeah, you know, who are you today?
Sure. So, Stephen Kelly, I'm Chief Executive of an organisation called Manufacturing Northern Ireland. Does exactly what it says on the tin. We represent manufacturers here in Northern Ireland, and our role is essentially to try to create the environment in which manufacturers like yourselves and others can sustain and build and grow a manufacturing business. It's about protecting the jobs, it's about protecting the exports, it's about protecting the R&D investments that are being made. But it's largely just around ensuring that the conditions are right to allow manufacturing businesses to thrive, not just to survive.
And so I imagine in that role, you're interfacing with government quite a bit, a lot of back and forward to Stormont and Westminster and so forth. Would that be the case?
Absolutely. So the environment is defined by a number of different things that are in the control of businesses themselves. So the choices that they make, the investments that they make, how they go about operating their businesses. And we leave that largely to businesses themselves, although we do share best practice from one company to another, and find solutions that somebody's already dealt with a problem and no problem is new. So we'll share that information. But the other side of the environment is the policy environment. So it's what governments are doing around taxation, big political decisions around investing in skills or infrastructure or whatever else, big global geopolitical stuff. Well, that's Brexit, dealing with the issue around COVID, and where we are now, which is largely around wars in Europe and in the Middle East, impacting on supply chains and the cost of doing business, energy prices and logistics. And those types of things is what largely makes up my day. So if I kind of divided an average 6-day week, you know that as an entrepreneur yourself, you're never really off. I would say roughly about 4 of those 6 days is dealing with problems that have been brought to me by manufacturing members to say, here, we've just discovered this, or we've been struggling with this for quite a while. The government's doing this to us. The latest one being they're introducing tariffs on steel into the UK and also into the EU. What can you do to help? And we would pick up the phone, we'd write a letter, we'd go and meet, we'd threaten if required. Our politicians in Belfast, in London, in Dublin, in Brussels, and in the past as well, in Washington as well, to say, listen, here's the evidence. The decisions that you're taking have consequences. Those consequences you need to own, or you can avoid those consequences by providing mitigations, whether that's money or changing systems or processes or policies. So that's the area that we largely sit in. And then the rest of the time is just dealing directly with businesses themselves. Like even today, dealing with issues on drivers that have lost their driving license and they can't be found, had health issues or whatever. Issues around steel, and preparing for a meeting that we have later this week with our economy minister on the single biggest piece of legislation in Northern Ireland, which is called the Good Jobs and Employment Rights Bill, where the intention is to introduce lots of really good things that are good for employees and good businesses like this are already operating. So creating that level playing field so you can't be undercut, minimum level of protections. But in addition to that, introducing it, making it more easy for trade unions to be organised within the workplace. Some issues with some of that bill, and we're preparing to go and have a conversation with her tomorrow before that bill is finally introduced into
when's it due, Stephen?
So the Northern Ireland Executive are meeting on the 28th of May. If the Executive approves the Minister's bill, then that will go into the Northern Ireland Assembly and be subject to the scrutiny processes through the committees and debates in the chamber. And that comes with risks. So the bill will be what the minister wants it to be for now, but when the Assembly take hold of it, it's subject to amendment and reviews. So people could bring through potentially really difficult policy choices there that will impact the world of work in Northern Ireland in a positive way, but also potentially in a negative way.
Okay. So it's a particularly fractious time, really, isn't it, that we're in? I mean, globally and distilled down into our own country and the UK and our wider relationship with the EU. So I guess you're going to be busy and plenty of potential for expanded manufacturing. And I'm imagining there are very large companies in the organisation and also probably family-owned SMEs and so forth. What's the sort of balance, sort of large to very small organisations do you have? You know, I'm imagining the kind of help that you give? Is it more towards the SME side, or is it fairly balanced?
So the first part of what you said there about the world being pretty fractious at the moment, I don't think there's been a more difficult time to be a manufacturer. The challenges that have been faced around supply chains, availability of labour, logistics, cost of doing business, etc., 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 have never been probably as extreme as they are right now. In fact, since the UK decided to leave the EU in June 2016, we've had 10 years of really, really difficult times to be in business. There's no doubt about that. We'll maybe discuss that a bit later on. So we see ourselves to be sitting there alongside our manufacturers to say, well, we own the connections, we own the relationships, we know the people to go and speak to. We can carry your voice to them, whether it's in politics or in the media or policymakers or whatever the case may be. And we'll go and try to sort your problem out with you, but for you. And the vast majority of our manufacturing community is SMEs. Only 1% of manufacturers in Northern Ireland are large, so more than 250 employees. Now, they account for half of all the turnover and half of all the employment, so they're incredibly important. 99% are medium or small, and in fact, 97% are SMEs. So it's family firms, people whose family name are on their chest as well as above the door, that predominate in this economy, as they do in many other economies as well. The good thing is that the big guys recognize that, and they need a really successful small economy in order to support what they do. So we get funded largely from the big guys, and they pay more for my services and colleague services in order to support the smaller guys, because they see it as a really important ecosystem. They see it as people providing jobs where people want to come and work and to build their own homes and to contribute to that community. So yes, we have a lot of larger manufacturers and they're all part of who we are, but the vast, vast majority, 97% of our membership is small, less than 50 employees. And in fact, I would say more than half of them are less than 10 employees as well.
I was reading your e-zine, which I have to say I do enjoy, and you had an article today, making things matters, making things still matters. You being a local person from the same city as myself will know the sort of the history of the city was effectively built on shirt manufacturing. We were the first city in the world to make a shirt in a factory environment, an industry that was heavily populated with female workers, and there was massive male unemployment in this city. I suppose, everybody's focused these days on pharma and tech companies and so forth, and the industry that I'm from, that I kind of know and love, clothing and textiles. It's a big sector globally. I was just noting down some data that came across my desk recently. Clothing and textiles, believe it or not, it's 2 trillion globally, making it basically 2% of GDP. Would you believe? It's the 3rd biggest employer globally. It's the 7th biggest sector globally. It's the 2nd biggest employer of women globally. It's much bigger than pharma. For example, pharma is a mere 1.6 trillion versus the 2 trillion in clothing and textiles. So, making things still matters, and this sector is so big that if it were a country, it would be the 7th biggest country in the world in terms of GDP. Just incredible, some of the data that relates to our sector, it just amazes me. And, one of the things about it is, AI is having an impact. Of course it is having an impact, but people are still going to make clothes, and you can use robotics in a very, very large factory. It's a bit trickier to justify that kind of investment in a smaller factory. Although, you've seen our factory here today, and we do have some robotics in that factory. But what do you see in terms of the sort of the wider industrial sector of Northern Ireland in terms of AI and robotics? Where's it impacting most? What have you seen that's any companies making fabulous use of AI or robotics?
So you're right, making things still matters. And even, well, I'll take it back a step. If you stopped 100 people in the street and asked them who was the largest employers, even just in this council area, they would think about the technology firms, they would think about other sectors. But actually, despite the fact that we've largely lost our textiles industry, yourself being an example of success that still remains here, manufacturing still remains the 2nd largest employer in the Derry City and Strabane Council. And actually, at the core of that, there still are textile firms like O'Neill's and Strabane, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. if we didn't have people still making things with their hands, we would live in a really different world. Just think about what's around us here. I mean, we're sitting on chairs that someone's made with their hands at a table. Technology in terms of microphones still requires physical things. If we didn't have clothes on us, this would be a really different type of podcast, obviously. But we still depend upon people making physical things. So the article was largely arguing that in a world that is becoming more advanced, that is becoming more digitized, that is becoming more automated and subject to robotics, actually people are still at the core of that. Physical things are still at the core. We will not and we will never live in a community or in a world that doesn't have physical things, the food on the tables and the tables that the food's sitting on, the plate and the knives, etc., 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 etc. So there remains a really strong present and future for manufacturing businesses. The challenge then is, how do you drive productivity? So how do you make the product you make as consistently good as it's always been, applying technology in order to make you more productive, removing things that bother people and repetitive tasks or whatever the case may be, so that they can do and have a better job. How do you use technology and data to kind of go, well, how are we managing our efficiency here? And as you said, I had a great tour around the factory a little earlier on, subject to large levels of technology that you probably don't see because you're in it every single day. Yes, you're bringing in some robotics, but there's a huge level of automation there. Well, it's at a basic level in terms of the sewing machines and the embroidery machines, or whether it's your washing facilities, but your whole warehousing and your dispatch, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The fact that you have technology inserted into some of the clothing that you're making for individual clients, technology has an impact on the physical side of what is seen as probably one of the oldest and more traditional industries, which is clothing and textiles. So it's everywhere. It's all around us. We need to find ways in which to embrace it, but it's not about replacing what is traditional and what will have to remain if we want to live the types of lives that we do want to live.
Great. And what about Northern Ireland and the sort of the potential between sort of, if you take a horizon of say now to 2030, what do you see the great opportunities for manufacturers in Northern Ireland, or perhaps companies that want to invest in Northern Ireland and set up manufacturing? What are the opportunities? What are the things that you think are important, might attract people, and what could manufacturing Northern Ireland do for such companies?
So we already dominate globally various sectors and subsectors. When people find that odd that this little piece of cold, wet granite in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean obviously won't get a job at the tourist board. But when you think about how small a place we are, we're only 1.9 million people. We're on the edge of a continent. We're an island off a continent. So you kind of think about, well, how can that be economically, just given its geography, how economically can that be a success whenever all the additional costs of transportation and raw materials and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera are available?
And what are those sectors that we dominate?
So we dominate. If I take aerospace as an example, just some primary aerospace businesses here. We make the wings for the Airbus aircraft, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when you look down inside those aircraft interiors, Northern Ireland's dominating in that sector. So a third of the world's first class, business class, and premium economy seats on all aircraft in the world, a third of all those aircraft seats are made here in Northern Ireland.
Dominated by one company, or
dominated by two companies: Collins Aerospace in Kilkeel, and Thompson Aeroseating in Portadown. So those two companies dominate those sectors. They obviously have a supply chain that's made up of people who are doing textiles in terms of the seating, who are doing injection moldings and plastics, that are doing precision engineering, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And those guys have now spilled out into other industries as well. We have a sector in a small triangle in County Tyrone, what we call our mobile crushing and screening sector. 40% of all the equipment that's in quarries across the world.
Wow.
And on now increasingly on construction sites and on other waste sites like municipal waste, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are machines that are made here in Northern Ireland. They've taken the idea that there's raw materials, they're fresh raw materials from a quarry or used raw materials from construction sites or waste sites. And they chop them all up and they sort them out into the different reusable products. 40% of the world's supply of those all comes from a small corner in County Tyrone. You'll have people with Tyrone accents commissioning bits of machinery in the Amazon jungle today. Good luck to them, because I struggle with the accent. But it's an incredible system. And even when I look here in this city, itself, just a few hundred yards away from where we're currently sitting, is Seagate Technologies. They dominate the world in terms of mobile storage. They've created this new product called Hammer, and Hammer it has 4 times the amount of storage data storage, sorry, on it, but using a quarter of the energy requirement.
Mm-hmm.
So you think about the world's changing to more AI, it's around us everywhere. It's in all of our phones, it's in our computers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's driven because of technology that's made here. And what it means is that 1 in 4 of every single electronic device in the world has a little piece of dairy in it. There's 1,700 people working just across the way, almost 200 people there with PhDs, creating this new world of data storage, all coming from this city. And we can tell stories like that right across. We have something very, very peculiar here. Isn't available elsewhere, and I'll talk then about the market opportunity on top of that. We have nimble, innovative, ambitious, and entrepreneurial people and businesses who go, we can't sit still. We have to fight for everything given our location. We can't sit still, and we need to go out and win. And the way that you win is actually creating brilliant products, first class, globally recognized customer service, meeting customer needs and demands consistently every single time, and a group of people that's actually quite nice to be around. So they like to buy it because of the relationships that they've managed to establish. That's not available anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And that, applied to the market opportunity that we have, if we can talk about, is a real recipe for this as being one of the most attractive investment locations for manufacturing business.
On a related subject, I remember reading once upon a time that the Northern Irish accent was the most popular and trusted accent in the world for call centers, and we've got quite a number.
It was also voted the sexiest accent as well. Maybe your listeners would disagree today, but
but yeah, there's quite a number of those call centers in and around this area, and obviously part at least for that the apparent friendliness and trustworthiness of the accent. What about the city itself? You know, you like me grew up in a city that was, you know, in bad shape because of the Troubles, and is now you know, I'm sure like me also you always had a great belief that it would become something, you know, because there was always a kind of a specialness to it, I thought, and it always had some wonderful raw ingredients. It is a beautiful place, the river flowing up through the city, and the Sperrin Mountains on this side, and the Donegal Mountains on this side. I mean, it is a truly, truly beautiful place. And on a sunny day, that sort of the riverside area, and between the two bridges and across the Peace Bridge, I mean, it's just so nice. It's transformed in so many ways. The restaurant situation here is really fantastic. You know, for a city of, what are we, like about 110,000 people or something like this. The standard of restaurants that we've access to is just fantastic. You know, great bars. I mean, it's a great place to live, and great schools, and we take for granted, I think, so the education system here somewhat, but we're spoiled for choice for somewhere to send our kids to a really high quality school. We've got a city deal. Now, I don't know much about it. Can you tell us a little bit about the city deal? What does it mean for the city, for the region, for manufacturers within the region, for the people that live here? And, you know, because this podcast, you know, has been going for a little while now. We have people listening in from America and Asia and all sorts, but also lots of local people. So can you tell us a little bit about that, about the city
Sure.
deal?
I mean, you're right. Like you, I've chosen not to move away from here. Yet many people in our peer groups, our friends and others, may have gone to university and travelled as close as Belfast or as far away as across the water to universities in Manchester or Liverpool, whatever. But we've chosen to be here. So there's a reason for that, because we could work nationally and internationally. We've been given offers and opportunities to work nationally and internationally. But instead, we choose to live and create our homes and families here, and then catch the red-eye flight at 3 a.m., much to our own expense. Why? Because this is a special place. It's physically beautiful. There's no doubt about that at all. You used the word raw in the middle of that question, which I think is very appropriate for here as well. We have a rawness about us. Dairy people will tell you what they think. They'll know really, really quickly, and you won't be allowed to get above your station for a second. But alongside that is a warmth and a community spirit. And if something goes wrong, people just gather around. Just saying beforehand, we were at a dinner a couple of weeks ago, we just raised 40,000 quid for the RNLI in memory of a family who'd gone into the water there. People were just firing money at that. They say, we want to give you the support. That's in a place that isn't traditionally that well off. So that's just one little example of there's a community spirit and warmth there that is worth a 3 a.m. alarm call in order to catch a 6 a.m. flight, because you can't get, and you don't get that just anywhere. But we do have, and we are on the cusp of something quite exciting. So you mentioned City Deal. So City Deal was a UK government initiative. It's hundreds of millions of pounds. They're about to flow into the city that will change the fortunes and the face of the city in the next 10 years. There's investments in there around leisure facilities and other bits and pieces. But from an economic point of view, there's a big investment in terms of growing our university capability. And I chair a task force for our Minister for the Economy to move basically to double the size of the campus and the number of people being taught at the
What sort of size is the campus?
So when we first started our job in 2024, it was just short of 5,000 people being educated at the campus. There's 6,500 today. The target's 10 as quickly as we possibly can. It will depend upon how quickly we can build things. Some of those things have been built with City Deal money, and then specifically there's two big projects along our quay that will be part of that. So the first is going to be a new, larger school of medicine, educating the doctors that we need in our NHS and in our private practice. That's a graduate entry school. So it's not undergraduates. It's people who've already had their undergraduate career. They've done their running to Australia and seen the world, and they want to come back to a place they can call home. Mm-hmm. And so they're likely to stay and train, like what we largely do at our universities, which is train doctors to export them. Yeah. These are people who've done their running and are coming to stay now. So there's going to be a new medical school along the quay, and then quite just opposite that, across the road actually from our council offices, there's a advanced manufacturing centre called Catrick, and that will basically team up from an innovation point of view at quite a high TRL level, so a high research level. All the skills and expertise that is owned in Derry already around robotics, particularly smart robotics around using eyes and making the robot then think for itself in order to pick out and do individual tasks. So there's a lot of the usages for robots are repetitive tasks, doing one thing 20,000 times every single day. But businesses like yours and others, they're small, they're nimble. It's picking and choosing, making choices rather than repeating single tasks multiple times. So it's about taking the best of their knowledge and skills in technology and AI and robotics and others, applying that to a real world, which is largely focused around our manufacturing community. Mm-hmm. So there's big investment coming in for that as well. So physically, the city will change because of new buildings being built. Mm-hmm. Economically, the city will change because of all these additional students, making our businesses more productive, people setting up their own businesses on the back of the research that they've been involved in, and then ultimately changing the fortune of this place. So we will have, by the time we finish with this project, we'll have... When's it running from until, Stephen, roughly? So we started in 2024, and the ambition is to get this done by 2032. That may extend out a little bit because the world changes and who can make a plan that lasts for 10 years. But we're going to have the warmest, friendliest city on these islands, combined with a really innovative industry and academia-led innovation cluster that will transform this place as the great place that we know and where we've chosen to spend all our lives. That sounds really a very optimistic vision of the future for the city, Northern Ireland more generally. You're an entrepreneur. You have to be optimistic. You have an optimism bias, I would say. Where you get up in the morning, you go, yesterday was a difficult day, tomorrow's going to be better, or today's going to be better. I'm going to get more clients. I'm going to win that contract. I'm going to be more productive. We're going to get a better price margin. Whatever the case may be, you have to. If you didn't wake up with optimism, you might as well just stay in your bed. And I think you, as an entrepreneur, understand that better than most. Yeah. The fear factor of not having enough work is a great motivating factor as well to get you up nice and early in the morning. And well, you have to pay wages on a Friday. First thing you think about on a Monday is, do we have enough money coming in to pay the wages, enough to pay the supply chain, a wee bit left over for investment, and to pay myself at the end of all of that. That's very motivating. There's no doubt about it. But ambition comes beyond that. And that's the difference between somebody who manages a business and the entrepreneur who really leads it. I arrived in, I think, just before 7 o'clock this morning, and the building was already open. Both of my sons actually were already here. I heard them leaving quite a bit before me. So, the building must have been open about 6:30. You know, it's great to see on a summer's day, a summer's morning when you come in and already it started. You know, I think self-motivated people coming in and helping
us create a future and create a future for themselves and their families. Stephen, this book, thank you very much for the gift. Campaign, Canvas, and Cavalcade from Manufacturing. What am I going to find out about when I read this book?
Well, that's actually the story about the birth of my own organization. I wasn't there at the time, but essentially what was proposed back in 2003 was that manufacturing businesses in Northern Ireland would be put on the same basis as other manufacturing businesses elsewhere in the UK, in that they would begin to pay business rates on the properties. So going back to the formation of Northern Ireland back in 1921, manufacturing businesses didn't pay any business rates. And the reason for that was obviously small place, brand new country. It had been leading the world globally in terms of ship making and rope making and whiskey making. Those industries had really begun to kind of wane and die off. Mm-hmm. So the government at the time said, well, we need to build more of this production capability. So we didn't put any taxation on the properties. But in 2003, the UK Labour government said, we want everybody in Northern Ireland to pay the same as everywhere else in the UK. Decided that they were going to introduce business rates. A little manufacturer, a baker here in Derry, went next door to a glazier. Sounds like a start of a nursery rhyme. And they had a conversation and said, well, we can't allow this to happen. And from there, a campaign was born. Those two people spoke to two other people each. Those people then spoke to another 8 people each. Those 8 spoke to 16 people each. And a campaign was born. And very successfully then in 2007, when our government, after the Good Friday Agreement and the peace deal that we had here, struggled to form a government. In 2007, it started the government up and running again. And the very first action from our finance minister was to say, I'm calling a halt to these builds because our manufacturing community needs supported. They've promised us, the manufacturers have promised us that they'll employ more people, they'll invest in their premises, and they'll sell more internationally. And roll forward to today, that's exactly what we've done. We've record levels of people employed in manufacturing. We had record levels when we were building the Titanic and others. Okay. But we're now back to 100,000 people employed directly in manufacturing, supporting another 170,000 people elsewhere wholly in the economy, which means we have 1 in 4 families in Northern Ireland are completely dependent upon a manufacturing wage. It doesn't sound like an industry in decline. It's quite the opposite. We have a record amount of sales globally. We're the only sector that has a net trade balance. So we sell more internationally than what we bring in and what it costs to produce here. We're on 50% of the private sector R&D spend is our manufacturing businesses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this was a campaign that was born in the city to say, don't just kind of celebrate a proud manufacturing past. We actually have a big opportunity going forward if you allow us the conditions to do that. And our government, our Northern Ireland executive, agreed to that, and the book documents that period.
And so in closing, what is the impact on business rates for Northern Irish manufacturers?
So for instance, so every year we go and secure a £75 million discount to this business's business rates and other manufacturing businesses that we have here. It puts us on a competitive advantage over businesses in Ireland and in other parts of the United Kingdom. And it means that if you wanted to build and expand this factory, which you've done, you've added additional space on here. I've had a look around, it looks brilliant. And it basically means that you're free to spend your money on things that'll make your business better, rather than giving your money to government to fill in potholes or run waiting lists at hospitals or leaky roofs in schools, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's nobody understands how to spend their money better than the people that are running their businesses themselves. So it allows you to do that.
Couldn't agree more, Stephen. Stephen, on that note, I'll say thank you on behalf of all manufacturers in Northern Ireland for getting us that discount. Long may that continue. It's really lovely to see you, Stephen. Thank you so much for chatting with me today. Hope you enjoyed the chat.
Thank you, Simon. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.